As I said, I am from a middle class family. I was earning $10,000 a month, which is a large sum in those days, and sitting in Singapore, Bangkok, traveling around the world. So the larger question in my mind is that how do I take the decision?
That's Manav Garg you just heard. He's the former founder and CEO of Eka Software, a SaaS, that software as a service company that operates in the global commodities trading space. I said former because Manav started Eka way back in 2004, that's 20 years ago, and just sold it earlier this year. Since Manav was talking about earning $10,000 a month back in the early 2000s, we naturally got talking about golden handcuffs. You know, when people earn so much money that they become risk averse? A lot of people today are attracted to the lure of startups, but not necessarily the grind that comes with them, including much, much lower pay.
So my competition was TriplePoint, Openlink, SAP, large companies at that time, about $100 million plus companies. So I started calling them, cold calling. And few of them didn't pick up my phone. One person luckily picked up my phone saying, please don't call me, again and again. It's not nice. I'm never going to work for Indian company. I said, fine, since I have you on phone, can I meet you? I said, no. He said, no. Why? What will you do by meeting me? Okay, so I said, let's have coffee. What I will do is, tell me your travel schedule. He said, I am flying to London tomorrow, so I am going to be very busy. I said, okay, let me do one thing. I will travel to London next day, and I will meet you at Heathrow. Just have a coffee. You anyway will take a shower. Most of the people from New York travel to London that red-eye flight, take shower in the arrival lounge. I knew that. I said, I will meet you in the arrival lounge. Half an hour coffee and then you're free to go. He said, fine. Luckily, he said, fine.
It takes a lot of courage to fly all the way from India to London to meet someone who just told you on your face that he doesn't want to work for an Indian company. And a lot of vision to convince that very same person to join you. But that's what happened at the end of that 30-minute meeting in London that stretched to 2 hours. Today, after 20 years as a founder, Manav has jumped right back into the ring as the co-founder of venture capital firm Together Fund, along with Girish Mathrubootham of Freshworks, whom you've heard earlier on the podcast, and a few others. When I asked him about something most potential founders overlooked, his answer was easy: co-founder selection.
See, in India also still we have in that cultural mix where you start up with your college friends because you spend time in dorm together, you went to college, you went through life's ups and downs together, right? So therefore you're very attuned to start up with your friends from college. Most likely, that's the most likely case, or from your workplace. You work for somebody in Amazon, Flipkart, Freshworks, Eka, Zoho, so therefore you end up starting up. I personally think that there is also a way to manufacture your co-founders.
Manav advises founders to set aside at least 6 months to quote-unquote manufacture their co-founders by just meeting a lot of people. My conversation with Manav uncovers a lot of insight on how young founders should think about building for the long haul. He did it for 20 years. There's a lot of very counterintuitive builder wisdom to unpack in today's conversation. I'm Rohin Dharmakumar, your host, and this is First Principles. Focus on the effort and not the result. This is a popular verse from the Bhagavad Gita. It's also your favorite verse. How do you go about applying it in the day-to-day hustle of life? Because you've also said work is not work, work is a mission. I think you said this in a podcast some years ago. How do these verses, how do these thoughts describe your views towards entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for having, first of all, Rohin, and a great question to start off the conversation. A little backstory to this is, why Bhagavad Gita plays an important role in my life, because growing up when I was in grade 7 till grade 10, I would have probably read Bhagavad Gita 10 times.
Wow.
Mostly out of rote, because my family was religious. My grandparents used to go to, temple 3 a.m. every morning. So I kind of started getting up with them, even when I was grade 7 at 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. And they said, okay, start reading Bhagavad Gita. So I actually first 4 times, it was just by rote. So objective was to first I read it in over 1 week, then 3 days, then 1 day, and then that's how it was compressed all the time. So actually, sometimes that learning by rote also really helps because I started learning the verse, started understanding what does it actually mean, and then I used to go to Haridwar to, and there in summer holidays you'll get a lot of Gita scholars. So there actually I started discovering the actual meaning of Gita since I knew so much. So now coming back to the question that you've asked, why that mission
Focus on the effort and not the result, or
yeah, because see, Gita is around a concept called nothing is permanent. It talks about, for example, if you have pain in your right knee, you stop focusing and saying, okay, this pain is not permanent, it will go away, and you will actually see that pain will shift in your body throughout. And certainly, that pain is not the most important part. The most important part is the work you're going to do. So, therefore, the whole concept of nothing is permanent really is so much applicable in entrepreneur's life, right? When you start off many a times today, and even when I started off, most of us are starting as a cold start, right? We have come from middle class backgrounds. We see the problem, we face it, or a friend of ours faces it, and we say, let's start. It's almost a start like that, right? Cold start, right? And from there on, funding is a challenge, and hiring first team is a challenge. So you go through multiple challenges, and it's like founder is all weather proof, all time zones proof. So that whole concept of nothing is permanent helps you get over your mental toughness. So if there's a problem with the customer, you're going to say, okay, it's not going to stay forever. Let me focus on getting the bug solved, and it will eventually fall in place.
it's interesting because I think you're the first founder I've spoken to who's come to entrepreneurship having understood and imbibed some of the philosophical truths that usually come with 5 to 10 years of the hard knocks of entrepreneurship. And then you realize that, look, nothing is permanent, bad times will go away, customer problems will get solved, funding will come, the business will not die. But it's very interesting that you experience many of these truths as a child in school with your grandparents and then essentially built it. It was fascinating. How do you describe yourself these days, Manav? You are a founder. You were, I guess it's one of those things that once a founder, always a founder. But you're also a founder who's sold his business. And we'll get to that later. But what's your introduction these days when you meet people?
Okay, my personal introduction is that I built Eka into a vertical software company, global company. Now I'm a venture capitalist and focus on building companies from India.
Super. What is Eka and what is CTRM, the organization that you built?
So Eka is a vertical SaaS startup which was focused on commodities market, the companies who deal in oil, gas, rice, agri-commodities, mining, coffee beans, right? All the things that we consume in one form or the other in a daily basis. So Eka helped those companies who will bring those commodities from farm to fork, for example. Companies like Cargill, companies like Unilever, the food companies, Kraft General Food.
So what, manage the supply chain around
so
those
we manage
products?
the end-to-end. It's called a trading and risk supply chain.
CTRM means that?
Yeah, commodity trading and risk management, which covers the entire supply chain from, if I take an agri supply chain, accumulation from buying from farmers and then local logistics and then shipping globally and making delivery. For example, if you talk about coffee beans, right? So somebody has to bring the coffee beans from Vietnam and Brazil to Nestle's factory in Europe or wherever they are to make sure the consumer is getting their coffee every day on the shelf. The uniqueness about commodities is that the prices also fluctuate like stock market on a daily basis. So therefore, it's a unique industry because on one hand, you're managing the entire supply chain and you're also managing the risk, which is futures and options, and making sure that your price stability is guaranteed.
So if I were to understand it right, you're saying Eka is a software as a service, which essentially acts as a software layer that manages the entire supply chain of commodities. Plus, there is a financial layer as well, which
Correct.
you talked about risk, etc.,
Yes.
which is the fluctuation of these commodities and their prices over time. So there is some element of managing that risk.
So the
as
daily
well.
challenge that a Unilever or a Cargill or a Nestle faces is they are not able to finalize the price of a commodity on a daily basis, right? They cannot manufacture or build a supply chain saying, I'm going to pay X today and Y tomorrow, right? So therefore, the job of the software is to make sure they bring transparency to the daily movements of P&L or position, which you call how much you have to buy and sell. So that's what software does for all the companies who are involved in either buying, selling or trading of commodities.
When did you start Eka?
2004.
Wow, so it's 20 years
Yeah.
since you started an organization. And you've sold Eka to a larger organization. Which is that organization? And tell us a bit about that sale.
Yeah, so we ran a process of selling the company, and we sell it to a PE firm called STG, which is Symphony Technology Group, now renamed as STG. It's a $10 billion private equity firm focused primarily on enterprise software. So they are the owners of, for example, SurveyMonkey, RSA, McAfee.
Interesting.
Like
so
that.
They've got a collection of very large SaaS businesses internally.
Correct, yeah. Enterprise software businesses globally.
Good. And when did you sell Eka?
I think by March end.
And
just about 4 weeks back, yeah.
Oh, great. So that's, and now for the first time in 20 years, you're no longer part of Eka.
Correct.
Operationally.
Yes, that's true. I'm just a board advisor now.
All right. When you sold Eka, can you give us a sense of what its scale was? I mean, how many employees did it have? What was its revenue, etc.?
So Eka has been around $30 million. With employ about 400 plus employees globally. We have 10 global offices, 2 in Australia, 4 in the US, then in India, Singapore, and Geneva.
Have you raised, you said you've now become a venture capitalist. We'll get to that. But had you raised venture capital for Eka?
Yeah, so see, when I started in 2004, and you would remember, there were hardly any VCs around. There were no angel networks, nothing like that existed. So my fundraising journey has been a little bit more, not as straightforward as you would see these days, because the capital availability was not there. So when I left my job in 2002. I had nowhere to go. I had just with my thought that, I have to focus on, I had 1 year of compensation saved with me. So I knew 1 year I can survive. So I had to figure this out. So I went around in Asia. I was in Singapore that time. And nobody will believe me saying, you are a persona coming from not where software, you don't know anything about software. You never built a company before. You're not from business family. So
how old were you?
I was 27.
And you're 27. That's the other thing, right?
Yeah. And 27. So no kind of experience behind. You said, therefore we can't give you any capital in Asia at least. So I had no option. I went back to the chairman of the group I used to work for, GP Group. He's a very entrepreneurial, billionaire. So I barged into his room and he spoke to me for half an hour and he said, fine, I'll back you. And he said, how much money? I had literally no clue, Rohin, that time as to how much money would be required. I said $1 million. I was a trader, so I was, used to thinking on the spot. So I said $1 million. He said, fine, I'll back you $1 million. So that was the first funding, which was more family office funding. And then we went through the entire, how to look at co-founder agreements and everything. Will come to that. And then in 2009, we thought we were been profitable from 2004 to 2009 because I knew the customers really well. We got the customers. So we had early revenue, early profitability. But both of us thought, Kirit Shah, his name, the investor who invested, that we should build the company for the long term. Let's try somebody, a venture capital firm who knows how to build the company. And I had met Naren Gupta, the founder of Nexus in 2006 and 7 in the Valley. So he told me, whenever you're raising capital, do write back to us. So I got in touch with him and Nexus invested in 2009-2010 timeframe. And then company started scaling, and then 2013, we got Silver Lake, which is the PE firm, one of the largest PE firm in the US, to invest in the company to primarily do M&A strategy.
Got it.
So totally we have raised about $50 million.
All right. How many co-founders do you have?
I don't have any co-founder.
Great. We'll come back to that because that's one of the things that I know that you want to talk about as well. How should founders think about the concept of co-founders? How would you explain the commodity market and the space that you operate in to say a 10-year-old?
I think if I have explained to your son or my son or my daughter, the way I will say is that the chocolate that you're eating, so this, if I'm a trader, we make sure that the chocolate is in your kitchen because of us, right? Because we manage.
It's interesting you should mention chocolates because right now we are seeing through an unprecedented rise in the price of cocoa.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we manage. But you're still eating the chocolate on a daily basis, right? So there's a process that goes along. So now so cocoa is a great example since you know about it, right? So now cocoa prices have gone. Suddenly the price on the shelf won't go up. So now there is a process, there is a scientific method of managing the entire supply chain because it affects the availability of cocoa beans because prices have shot up. It depends on the pricing of the cocoa beans and therefore the chocolate. So this entire process of managing this supply chain so that consumers can have the goods at the right time at the right place is commodity management.
Interesting. Your first job, I think, was with GP Traders, right?
Correct.
You did your MBA from IFT and you joined this company as a coffee trader. Or
Yeah.
this company was into coffee trading as
So
well?
company is a large, it was a
Commodities
$4
group.
billion conglomerate. It used to trade in rice, coal. I joined the coffee desk.
So similar to, let's say, Olam International,
Yeah,
etc.
it is similar to Olam International, correct.
All right. I saw that there was no, I'm quoting you, of course. I saw that there was no system to manage trading and risk in their business. I was working on spreadsheets. So I thought, let's just leave my job and see what can be done. You're a 27-year-old in your first job in Singapore. A lot of the folks will be thinking, hey, I'm in Singapore. This is a nice job. I could stay here. Long term, this is a nice place to settle down. What made you think of leaving that and starting a company?
It's an interesting question, which even my wife or my children also ask very often. So I think I have to go back to the way I've. So one is obviously the entire routing, the cultural routing with Gita that I got early on. Let me help you. A lot of contemplation. So I was very contemplative as a child because of that, right? So somehow, I grew up also in Punjab, where if you know, there are a lot of small scale businesses. So all my cousins, they said, why are you even going for engineering or for MBA? You come, run a business, it becomes 3-4 crore rupees, and you have a wonderful life in Punjab, right? That's how all my cousins were. So I decided that I want to start something. So in fact, after I left my regional engineering college in Jalandhar, I got a job in Blue Star in Delhi. I went there for 3 months. I said, I don't like this job. I came back to Chandigarh. My parents had moved to Chandigarh from Punjab doing terrorism. I said, I want to start something. So I created a plan to create, all this hardware taps and everything else. The initial investment was 70 lakhs way back in 1996. My father said, we don't have enough money, you have to figure something out. So I said, fine, let's then do an MBA because I can't start the business. So somehow I had, in doing my early years, I got this grounding of, to start the business all the time. So when I eventually went to GP Group in Bangkok and Singapore, trading is very entrepreneurial nature. On daily basis, you're making money, sometimes 100 million, sometimes a loss of $200 million. So it's like daily basis making money. So I was very tuned to thinking as to where the real opportunities are. So when I saw that on a daily basis, I am doing a lot of grunt work. I am thinking maybe 20%, 80% is going through spreadsheets, making sure data is correct because market is opening and you're scrambling for information. So I automatically thought about starting the business. But it's very clear to me that I will start something. So it just started with that. Okay, there's a opportunity and I should just make sure that something can be done about it. Now the question comes, how software?
Yeah, you
Because
had no experience in software.
and in the trading world, you don't think about software at all. You're looking at Reuters screens and you're on the phone and you're talking to farmer and you're talking to the buyers like Nestle, Lavazza and so on and so forth. So there's no room of software to creep in. The most basic thing that we use on daily basis was only email. That's about it. Faxes will come and all these things will happen all the point in time. So that's a very interesting story of what happened. So my few friends from computer engineering from REC, they said, we just got married. We want to come to Bangkok and give me your apartment. We want to have honeymoon in Bangkok. We don't have money, as all of us have after few years of college. So I said, fine, I will move on to my friend's house. You guys come and stay with me. So they came in. Their name was Rajiv and Raman. They came and stayed with me. And they said, by the way, we are planning to leave our job and start. There's a big .com boom in India, which has just went past. We're going to start some .com. I said, what is .com? That you build a software and software. They were building a flower delivery startup and will deliver flower to people as a gifting and as occasions. I said, okay, something is software. Then I actually started start reading about what software is. I was an engineer, electronics engineer, so it was easier for me to understand. And that's how the two matched. So my reading of software and my opportunity to see, okay, my intent to start a business and then spotting an opportunity led me to believe that there has to be some system in place to manage this.
And you decided to come to Bangalore to set it up?
No, so first of all, as I said, I am from a middle class family. I was earning $10,000 a month, which is a large sum in those days, and sitting in Singapore, Bangkok, traveling around the world. So the larger question in my mind is that how do I take the decision? Because what typically I have seen is you go to parents, they're going to say you should get married, $120,000 a year. You get married to a nice family and you are settled. At least they're off. That's what middle class families think. That's the biggest thing for them. Then if you talk to your friends, you go into this cost benefit analysis, work for 5 years, you will save so much. And as a trader, my boss had told me you will earn millions. So there's no way. So I didn't think anything. The only thought I had was that what is my downside? That if I fail, I have my 1 year salary with me and I can always take a job somewhere else. So it was a very simple way to think about it that time.
So it's interesting that you're thinking about your downside but not necessarily the upside that you're leaving by staying in the job. Was it something else as well? Like, you know what? Like, I get that you wanted to start on your own, but I get that typically when founders start out, one of the first things they think about is potential downside, right? Like, how long can I sustain myself? 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, etc. That's the worst case scenario. But how are you thinking about the best case scenario for you? Like, what was it? Were you even thinking about the money, the exits, or was it just starting something and doing something on your own?
I think what has been driving me all this from the start from my childhood is to urge to create something, and then be able to take the risk to do that. At various point in time, even my journey. If I dig deeper into my journey I was born and brought up in a place called Moga in Punjab, very small. I could not speak a single word of English till grade 12. And at that time, there was no internet, so there was no knowledge. There was no knowledge of even IITs. So I was the first one from my uh, town to actually apply for a common engineering test, which is a local test for Punjab, which even today exists, right? They were before that hardly anybody would have applied. Nobody had even got through for application, right? So I was always going to take the risk and go out of my comfort zone and see what can be done. So therefore, when you come from middle class background, I think you don't think about anything else. There's no business experience. So you can't see. There was no knowledge also back then. You can't really tap on a resource or a person to see what is possible. So I think ignorance is a bliss many times, I would say.
I was about to ask you that, is the world that we are in today, where potential founders or wannabe entrepreneurs have too much information, and I think many get caught up in this, I think, analysis paralysis, where they're weighing all pros and cons, etc., and stuff like that, and trying to reduce everything to a spreadsheet, right? Is this the right time to start? Is this the right market opportunity, etc., and stuff like that? But considered a rhetorical question.
No, it is. I think it's a very, very important question. We often repeat it, but I think that's where a podcast names is very apt. So I would call thinking about the first principles. So if you look at it, right, when I was thrown into a job of a trading world where billions are getting traded on a daily basis, and I have come from IFT, middle class backgrounds, don't know much about how to deal in such big numbers. It is a first principle thinking always helps you. So, for example, in trading, it was how is the demand supply shifting in coffee trading, for example, across Vietnam, Brazil, India, and various countries. How is the pattern of drinking changing? And then you apply it on a daily, way the funds are operating in the market. So similarly, when you start thinking about a startup, and if you have nothing to start from from scratch, I would go back to first principles. What is the core business problem I am solving? I was very clear that there is a business problem of understanding your daily P&L. I am struggling on a daily basis, and it is very valuable because my book was $1 billion. A single movement can be sometime 5 to 10% overnight, which is I'm looking at 100 million plus and minus on a daily basis. So therefore, if I knew how my P&L is moving, it's going to be very, very valuable information. So first principle thinking was to really go about the core principles of what's the problem you're solving, and do you have the wherewithal to fix that problem in one way or the other. So when
what does that mean?
Which means now, let's say there's a daily P&L problem to be solved. Now, can software solve it? Right now, tech people think that every problem can be solved by a tech, right? Then how can tech solve it, right? So I built a small software first to test it out myself, and then I went around and understand how this problem can be solved. And then the pricing also was on first principle. So therefore, coming back to the answer that you're trying to ask on the question, that a lot of founders do not go into the depth of the first principles of the thing that you're solving. If you look at the SaaS world, right, we have almost 5,000 plus startups. A lot of them are new one. Guess 30-40% are in CRM or a sales and marketing technology, which is
Why
just
is that?
because easier to start, you think that you understand, right? But
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you've made very interesting transition, and we are talking about as a potential founder thinking from first principles. You also made the transition from being a founder to now being a venture capitalist, like, you're part of Together Fund. We'll talk about that later. One of the things that a lot of founders are always wondering about, or potential founders are wondering about, is that how important is it to feel the problem that you're solving for firsthand? And this comes back to this point about CRM that you're making, right? The idea or the genesis for Eka came up from your personal experience.
correct.
Right? Now, if that happens, it's a great thing. But sometimes often it happens that there are no such epiphanies for somebody who wants to start out. So when you meet founders, potential founders seeking funding as a venture capitalist, how do you assess the shallow ideas where you're looking at, quote unquote, the top of funnel, or the market, overall market, based on some research report, which like for example, you just said that CRM, etc., 30-40% people are going there, because I'm also assuming that it's easy to start, plus the potential market looks so big, right?
Correct.
Whereas somebody who's starting with a personal problem, where also sometimes the issue is you tend to over index on your personal problem and you're not thinking, what is the right balance in the middle when you're talking to founders?
I think let's dig into the process. So I didn't work for 10 years. I have worked for 2.5, 3 years. That's about it, right? So I want to, abstract it out into the process that goes into validating a problem statement, right? So let's say after working for 3 months, I figured a problem that, this whole thing is very chaotic. I am writing something on a paper, giving it to a back office people. They write something, they make a mistake, and I keep on correcting it, right? Now, the reason I was very confident with this problem is because in those 3 years, I made about 2,000 calls. My daily work was from 7 a.m. That's when Japan opens, when you're in Singapore, Bangkok time zone, to finish at 2 a.m. in the night. And I used to call to every single supplier, which is across Vietnam, Brazil, Indonesia, India, Thailand, and call markets to Japan.
What would you talk to these suppliers?
So we are selling. What is trading? Trading is buying and selling. So, for example, Vietnam has a crop season from September to October. So you will go to talk to supplier. Okay, how is the crop looking on the ground? How much are you going to produce? What is the quality looking like? So based on that, you would take a position saying, okay, this year the crop in Vietnam is going to look good, so therefore the price will come down. Like what you're talking about. If I am a cocoa farmer, just going back to previous example, I will be in Ivory Coast once a month. I'll talk to the suppliers. How is the crop? Is there going to be drought or rain coming this year? So based on that, you will understand how the crop is going, and based on that, you will form a view and then take a position of buying and selling. So therefore, daily basis, you're in touch with the market across the globe, and similarly with the buyers also. That what they see in the demand, is demand coming down, how I think what the price is, and then build a long-term relationship with them. So that's the trading, that's what your job entails. So the entire process of me feeling the problem is not one fine day I had, suddenly this idea. It is the entire process of making those 1,000 calls and then intently listening to those customers as to where are they facing the real problems in their workflow, if I can just call it a workflow for time being. So I think when even if I have to start something, let's say tomorrow I am not a venture capitalist and I want to do a startup which is not in commodities, right? What would I do? I would actually go and talk to, let's say I want to do media startup. I'll come to Rohin and say, Rohin, okay, this is what you're doing. What's your experience? So I'll go and talk to 200 such or 500 such customers, as many as I can, to understand what they're saying and intently find out where the real opportunity, where the real problem is. So that's a process actually which goes in validating whatever you're thinking is right or wrong.
This kind of reminds me of Kabir Biswas, the founder of Dunzo, who started with just a WhatsApp and just delivering orders and continue to deliver hundreds, thousands of orders before he figured out what. So what you seem to be saying is and this also connects back to what I think Paul Graham has said, that do things that don't scale.
Correct.
Right. So in the early stages of a business, or at least at the ideation stage, you're saying it's much more important to have the unfair advantage of having done the hard grunt work that allows you to see what somebody else hasn't seen, rather than the spreadsheets and the calculations, etc.
Absolutely. You have to have some way of, if you haven't experienced the problem firsthand yourself, you have to go to talk to larger market to understand what's the real problem I'm trying to solve and how is it resonating. So that's the process which makes you believe that you have felt the problem enough, even if you haven't had the first-hand experience.
Hi, I'm Snigdha, and I host the Ken's daily business news podcast called Daybreak along with my colleague Rahel Philippos. And I'm interrupting Rohin today to talk about a recent special episode of Daybreak where we completely broke away from the regular format, and we also had a lot of fun recording it. You'll actually hear it in our voices. In this episode that dropped last Friday, we talk about a pretty extraordinary trend that has completely changed how we all look at skincare. And it all started about 5 years ago when a bunch of new skincare brands popped up both abroad and in India. And all of them had one thing in common. Their products were named after chemicals: niacinamide, hyaluronic acid, peptides, AHAs, BHAs, ceramides. But the funny thing is that they've been in our favorite skincare products forever. We just didn't know about it. So, what changed? How did these chemicals go from the tiny print on the back of labels to bold fonts in the front? Rahil and I spoke to Shamika Haldipurkar, the founder of a homegrown skincare brand called Dew, and also Vasudha Rai, the former beauty editor of Harper's Bazaar, to get to the bottom of this. There's a link to the episode in the show notes of this one. So give it a listen and let us know what you think. And with that, back to Rohin.
I want to switch back to your childhood. You've said that you come from a middle class family in Punjab. Your dad, for our research, has been an entrepreneur, businessman as well. He's like, it comes up that he started multiple businesses and he's failed at ventures 4 times. Now, there is a plus and a minus to that, right? You've obviously seen him take risks, fail, start again and stuff like that, right? So in some ways, you're seeing that it's okay to kind of do these things, or it's normal, it's not something. But there's also the scar tissue, maybe not for you, but for them, right? That, you've done your engineering, you've done your MBA, you've got a well-paying job, there is no risk. So from their point of view, you should be absolutely sitting in. How did that play out between you and your family when you said you also want to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, see, first of all, I think a lot goes in upbringing, and therefore, a lot of credit goes to my parents, right? So my father is an excellent engineer, and that's the reason he failed in business every time. He was a plant engineer at Nestle first. Nestle, before that NFL in Nangal, and then Nestle in Moga, where the factory is. So every time he'll go back to work, earn the money and try a small scale business. Eventually, because he's not a very good commercial manager, it eventually fails on the commercial side. But at the same time, he made sure that we never felt it. We had enough money to go to school. We had a normal, a lot of focus on education, as people coming from that background is even these days as well. So it was never felt that something is wrong happening in the family. It's like for us, it's a business as usual. We'll go to school, come and study, do well in exam, play out, go to, holidays to my uncle's house in Punjab, in small villages. So they didn't feel that something is going wrong. So therefore, nothing was abnormal for me when somebody is starting and failing. Yes, I'll hear sometimes this is stopped, now we're starting new, again is going back to a job. So therefore, they made me make sure that I focus on education. Therefore, when I started earning so well, the reason I didn't tell my parents is the same reason, because they would not have allowed me to start anything. And it's purely from a parent's practical viewpoint. I am also a father now. From a practical viewpoint, somebody who's earning $120,000 at that point in time, that too in a global location, you will never allow your child to start something just like that, because the risk is too high. So I didn't tell my parents at all. I just left my job, Rohin, without telling anybody. Anybody means my neighbor doesn't know, my best friend does not know, my parents do not know. Nobody knows.
It's interesting. There's also, so what you said is absolutely right about parents not wanting their children to leave such well-paying jobs. And there's also the fact that many entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs themselves get stuck into what we call golden handcuffs, right? Very high-paying jobs in large, respected, prestigious organizations. And I think what you hinted at earlier, that let me work for 5 years and save so much money, and then at that point you're like, okay, if I stick on for another 3 years or 4 years, and then it becomes something which becomes progressively harder. I'm sure you've had conversations with many of your friends and people in the network who must come to you and say, at a certain stage in middle age, we're not having fun. Tell us how to leave this and become entrepreneurs like you. What do you tell them when you have such conversations?
This is more of a philosophical conversation.
Absolutely.
But I'll try and answer for you. I think most of the time, first of all, I think why is really important. In life, if you look at why are you doing something. Like, I was lucky enough to have that upbringing to start thinking about why very, very early in my life. So I mentally got used to thinking about why and what is kind of driving me at a very early stage. But what I have seen with most of us, it is like, you take life as it comes. My children go to school, then my daughter just went to college, she graduate, she will do something, either a startup or she'll do a work, and then they continue their daily life, right? So you don't get enough time to, first of all, answer about why is what I'm doing is really important to me or not. So when they talk about I don't have fun, more often than not, what in my experience, what I have seen is they have not reflected or contemplated enough as to why am I doing what am I doing, right? Especially in India, you get married and suddenly you have to earn for the family, and then there's a social construct around it. So a lot of people are just, they went to IIT, IIM, RECs, and then went to schools and colleges and started earning, and you're just into that zone where you're just on the treadmill and doing those things, right? So when they stop, so first thing I ask them to write down as to why you want to do what you want to do. Number one. Number two, even if you want to do something which is very different what you're doing, is it something you're mentally comfortable with? See, a lot of it, the one question you didn't ask me, for example, is that why I was so comfortable leaving my job without telling anybody, right? Because I personally was mentally very comfortable with the risk in mind. So actually,
And the risk was contained to just you. You weren't married yet. You didn't have home loans, car loans,
nothing.
etc.
So I'm coming to that. So therefore, to me, this construct of risk in life is understanding that at a deeper level is really, really important, right? So therefore, how do you construct your life? You don't take big loans. You don't buy big houses. You make sure there's enough money plans. So basically, 50% of life is governed by finances. People don't accept it. People don't like to talk about it. But reality of life is that 50-60% of life is governed by how well you manage your finances. Because that gives you an extra edge based on which age group you're in to take that risk at any point in time. So I spend a lot of time in talking about the risk taking ability, either mentally. Some people are mentally very strong, saying, fine, I don't have a penny in my bank, but I am okay to go on the road. I'm okay to go road, sleep wherever I can. I can go back to a lodge, I can go back to a mansion, doesn't matter to me. So I think this mental model of thinking about risk is really, really important. People who are able to go over that hump of risk are the ones who are able to take the risk and move forward. And it could be true that you're doing a corporate job, you want to just leave everything and be a musician. You want to be a stand-up comedian, or you want to be an entrepreneur.
I mean, continuing along the same thread, what we saw during, I would say, the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, and now it's, of course, last 2 years, it's ended. The boom years of Indian startups and tech, especially the zero interest rate phenomena years when valuations were growing and companies were hiring like no one, we saw a significant shift of senior level talent from large established multinationals and organizations to startups, because at that point it seemed risk free that you will earn the same salary that you're earning, plus you have equity, plus you get this thing of working for a startup. But we've also seen that now kind of starting to reverse last 2 years when those very same startups like hit funding troubles, had to do layoffs, make do with less. A lot of the people who thought it would be so easy were the first ones to jump back to it as well. Have you seen that in your interactions with founders and startups as well?
So I'll contextualize a bit of this whole concept of risk as well. So more often than not, in my experience, the risk is also the way country grows or develops. When I started, that time is extremely risky. Nobody will give you a girl, you can't go out, you can't even say in a social setting that I've run a startup. That's like a social stigma at that point in time. Fast forward decade 2014-15, it became literally okay.
In fact, it became the other way around. If you say you're working...
After 2018, it became really glamorous. So we went through a period of very excess money and excess capital from 2018-19 to 21. And that was really glamorous. You go there working for a startup, people say, oh, really great guy, risk taker. And somebody's working for corporate is not seen really, really that game. So therefore, a lot of time, the societal trends also help people take the decision much faster. Now, what has happened typically is, I think India is in a long-term trend of startups. We may see a few blips, which we are seeing between 21 and 20, I would say till 23. Now we're going actually right now at Together Fund, we are seeing many more operators and executives who are starting up, and they are thinking about building their AI startup. So it's all about the waves as well. So you will see then when the new waves come, many people will jump in.
Why do you think that India will see many more startups in the future with respect to today?
So let's go back to what goes into making a nation a startup nation. Or if you look at the fundamental principles, you need a capital availability. So if I do before and after, in year 2000 to year 2020, there is a 1000x of capital availability. You have a very, very robust angel ecosystem, we have robust venture capital system, we have late stage, not extremely good, but still capital is available. So there is a capital available at all scales, from a individual writing a check to a institutional writing a $1 billion check, right? In SoftBank and other venture capitalists or PE firms of the world. So capital availability is at unprecedented high from 2 decade perspective. Your society has moved on by valuing the entrepreneurs. At least maybe they are not fully celebrated as yet, but there is a lot more positive spin to an entrepreneurship than it was in 2000. So now suddenly there is the whole risk element too has come down further. India always had a young talent, and India has young talent. So that really makes a difference because youth want to do different things. Many nations don't have it. We take it for granted. India is probably one of the youngest nation among
Yes,
the people.
we have arguably one of the world's, not arguably, the best demographic dividend in among large countries.
Yeah. So that youth energy is there to be tapped. So when you give a youth, and then India is on the rise. India was when? What, number 15 or number 20 in 2000? Now India is the top 5 economies. Slated to be number 3, arguably, in another 20 years, right? So that's what is bringing this entire mix together. You have capital availability, you have youth, you have opportunities, and your society which is celebrating entrepreneurship.
What's different about the nature of entrepreneurs who are starting up today with respect to, let's say, 10 years back, let's say 2010, 2015 era to 2024?
Oh, there's, I would say, a sea change. So I was an angel investor in 2012 onwards. So we will see people will come with just an idea which is not properly. The pitch deck, people don't know even how to build a pitch deck. They will simply say, I'm building this. They would not thought about the co-founding teams. They would not thought about the product mix. They would not do a little bit of research on market as well. It was as basic as that. And between 2014 and 18, as India, we did a lot of work in making sure we can build world-class products from India. Talking about the product ecosystem, whether consumer or B2B software. And then today, teams are fully prepared. They've done the research. Decks are excellent anyway in the world class. They understand the product game really, really well. I would say today, the go-to-market strategy is still a little bit of weak area for India because people are trying to conceive products in India for the global markets. But I think we're pretty much at par. Therefore, India is a top 3 startup nation in the world. Bangalore is at par with London, SF in many areas. Yes, we don't do deep research work. So for example, why do we don't have companies like OpenAI? OpenAI spent about 10 years or 8-10 years in research, and somebody funded them with $1 billion saying, here's the money, you go and figure out what can be done. So we are not there as yet. We don't have that kind of risk appetite. I think we have the talent, but the risk capital of that scale is not available as of now. But at a simpler level in the top 3 in the world, we are definitely there.
Okay, now that we are talking about starting up, you mentioned the word co-founders as well, right? Why is this something, you started a company, ran it for 20 years, sold it, were fairly successful, very successful at it without having a co-founder. But you have very strong views on the concept of founders having or not having co-founders. Like, do you want to tell us more about that? What is how has your own experience fed into that? And first, but let me ask you to say, what is your view on co-founders today if you had to reduce it to 1 or 2 lines?
I think having a journey alone is tough. There were times in my journey when I really thought that I wish I had a co-founder. Because if you look at the journey, I was, first of all, understanding the market. So I will travel 28 days to Europe and US, sitting with customers as to how to design. Come back and then sit with the engineering team to explain what has to be done. Then getting the first customer and also making sure I am the person who's delivering it, right? Then scaling the same thing. So I'm playing 2 roles at the same time. I think if I had a co-founder who was a CTO or technical, I think it would have definitely helped me a lot, first of all. So that's my experience has been. So I think getting a co-founder in my experience does help. Somebody who can gel along and who you have mutual respect towards. So I certainly believe that one should really think about teams as such and should have a co-founder who is complementary to your skill set in many ways.
Now, that's what you said is the ideal case, right? That you have a co-founder and that co-founder brings complementary skills to your own. But most of the businesses are started in non-ideal situations, right? What's the best way for a person who has an idea to, I know, I mean, things used to be different, like, back maybe 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ago, you would go to Thai conferences, you would go to Startup Saturdays, etc., and like, hang around and see. Does that still happen? How do people find co-founders today?
I think it's a great point, Rohin, that you brought it up. See, in India also still we have in that cultural mix where you start up with your college friends because you spend time in dorm together, you went to college, you went through life's ups and downs together, right? So therefore you're very attuned to start up with your friends from college. Most likely, that's the most likely case, or from your workplace. You work with somebody in Amazon, Flipkart, Freshworks, Eka, Zoho, so therefore you end up starting up. I personally think that there is also a way to manufacture your co-founders. If I am thoughtful about my business when I'm starting up, I would give 6 months to probably design the business. See, we design our lives, right? If I ask you to invest $1 million into a bank, you're not going to put it into FD. You're going to talk to 5 wealth managers. You're going to make sure how can it turn. So if you can architect your wealth or architect your product for that matter, right? Product architecture takes 6 months to build, even before the coding starts many times. Why don't you architect your co-founders? Because that is the single biggest or one of the single biggest contribution to the success of the company. If you can get co-founder who's complementary skill set, who you have had great relationship or can have the opportunity to have a great relationship, you can work along well on day-to-day basis. It can
Have
be
you
done.
seen, without going into specific names, have you seen founders who've come to you having, because what you're saying is that this can be done consciously and deliberately and in a planned manner.
Correct.
Now, my, I think, doubt to that comes from, there is one side of our brain which is the logical, planned, and then the other side which is like the relationships, the messy, the emotions, etc. And if there is one role in startups where I think this one can, the right side can play a much stronger role, is the co-founder role, right? Like, you said that, can you get along with this person? Do you have how does one manufacture this? You used a very interesting word. How can someone manufacture? It's almost like, if I were to say, finding a life partner. I mean, in fact, I don't think it's that much of an outlier, because if you typically ask any co-founder about, their spouse versus their co-founder, they'd almost always say that, look, I mean, both are almost equally tough to nail. But how do you manufacture this?
So I think at least one can try. I think first of all, I am seeing that happening with the second time founders, people who have a lot of experience in the corporate world, or somebody who has sold their companies at a scale before. They are much more careful about who are the co-founders, and they are, so the process, the way it works is, same as marriage, as you rightly, it's good analogy. So you go and meet 20 people, date them, spend time with them. So it takes time. Therefore I said 6 months. You're not going to find co-founder within the first. You may, if you're lucky, but
Interesting. So the thing is, people. So the reason I'm assuming people don't do that is because they don't attach enough significance to this to spend 6 months on it.
Correct.
Like, for example, if you ask a younger version of me from, let's say, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, that, and I've always wanted to kind of start up as well, I would always have these domains that I'd booked. I would always have these Excel ideas or presentation decks, etc. But if you ask me, are you going to spend 6 months of your time searching for a co-founder? Perhaps not. It was like a good to have, but not a must have. But you answer that rightly by saying people who've done it once understand the importance of having a right co-founder. So repeat founders do it better.
Even first time, if you're going to spend next 2 decades, so minimum a decade of your life is somebody, maybe 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day, why not spend enough time on it upfront rather than trying to discover as a part of the process? And second insight I have there is that, so I was in meeting with John Chambers, some close entrepreneurs. So he was explaining his process of hiring, and guess what he said? He said, I start hiring 12 months in advance. If I'm hiring an executive, I will meet him maybe 20 times over tea, coffee, lunch, dinner in informal settings to just make sure and get to know the person, and then decide after 12 months. That's the lead time to hire an executive for a Fortune 500 company. And the reason for that is, when I'm meeting for the first time and for an interview, you're going to always put the best answer. It's like a dating. You're not going to say yes to a girl after the first date. Obviously, you can have intuition, which is fine. But it's a more methodical process, and you don't have to keep your intuition at the side, right? Sometimes intuition can play, and you start feeling comfortable with the person much early on, right? And therefore, you can spend more time discussing the plan. So I think that's an insight. over a period of time, you get to know somebody and then you figure out who is the best partner for you.
So is this something that you actively use as an investor as well? That when someone comes to you, or a couple of people come to you as a co-founding team, you ask them, how do you come together? How did you?
We definitely ask, but as I said, you're absolutely right in your observation that 90% of the teams are still friends and college and people who work together. Still, we don't see. There are a few of the second-time founders we're in deep discussions with. They are thinking about co-founders. They are in fact telling us, okay, can you introduce me to more people? I'm starting this up. This is my idea, and I'm going to start in 6 months' time. I'm meeting everybody who can join me or who can be part of my co-founding team. So they are actively doing that. There are but very few examples.
Is it? I mean, I want to move on from this because we want to get to other topics also. But this is also fascinating. Is it? I mean, if you try and solve for it, like you said, 90% of people are still not taking it seriously enough. I'd like to understand why is that? Is that because they take it for granted? They underestimate its importance? They underestimate the risk of it
They
going
just
wrong?
don't know. Nobody has told them. It's a way the maturity of ecosystem. If I tell you 10 years back, why you've not thought about the global scale product quality? You say, I don't know. I'm learning. I've never been abroad. I've not dealt with enough products to know what global quality is. It's the same thing. So as we talk more about it, there are more examples. People talk about it. Okay, why it is important, how it is work. You will see people start doing it. People are really smart. All the young people who are coming, they're really, really smart, and they want to do something. And that's what New India is. So they are coming from all kind of towns. So if you look at the second profile, the people are coming from tier 3, tier 4 towns, as well as is Ivy Leagues, IIT, IIMs as well. So it's just a question of just evangelizing this.
What's the difference that you see in the founders and in their ideas of those who come from, let's say, the IITs, IIMs, etc., or like the Bangalores and Delhi NCRs, versus from the next rung of colleges, the smaller towns, etc., and stuff like that?
I think it is not about the idea. See, idea is an idea, depending upon what you're building, how you're
Teams,
building.
ideas, whatever.
I think
What is the
it is a
distinction?
drive. The people who are coming from what I call New India, they are so driven. They want to achieve something in life. It is the same thing which you were discussing a while back also, right? We all in Bangalore or big cities are more privileged. It's Indian cricket team. How many people are from Bangalore, Delhi and Calcutta? Tell me.
Or even IITs these days.
Or even, I said, tell me about the Indian cricket team. We have the best facilities here, best coaches, people, you're professionals, so parents can spend money on these things. Indian cricket team is not made from the top tier towns.
So it goes back to hunger and drive.
Yeah, hunger and drive. They are very, very driven. They want to do something, they want to prove themselves, they want to do something big, definitely.
It's normally something that I talk about in later sections, but I want to ask you, I mean, you're a parent. How do you think about hunger and drive for your children being in some ways the same privileged position today that you weren't, and from whatever we've spoken about till now, a huge part of your success has been because of that hunger and drive, and
Correct.
I think the zeal to prove ourselves. Like, I mean, I come from a middle class family as well. But I think with our children, it's no longer the case. Hunger and drive, they've grown up in an era of abundance and for no fault of theirs, right? And right now we're talking about where does the Indian team come from? Who are the founders with the maximum amount of zeal and drive, etc. and all. How do you think about this as a parent?
I think it's a big challenge, first of all. And that's a typical discussion between the parents over the weekend. And I don't have a perfect answer to it, right? My intuitive sense will tell me just nudge them towards a bit more drive, make them go through a little bit more hardships than they used to. So if you look at least my children, right? They go to the international school, they go abroad for studies, they have millions of choices from holidays to what they buy, what they wear, what they drive in.
It's almost like they have a curated life, and I say this with my own son as well, that they've played within this safe band with, they're not fluctuating outside into true hardship.
But that is not true of the developed world. So that's where I've been thinking about this, right? If I was born in the US or my son is born in the US, they will have a templatized life. They go to good school, they have good college, good friends, they go for holidays, they have musician, they will be learning an instrument, they'll be playing a sport. So there also you have entrepreneurship. US is the number one country in entrepreneurship, right? They in fact celebrate so much. So I think it is a lot about, and I'm giving my personal view on this,
Yes,
right?
of course.
It's a lot about the cultural orientation with the children. So having privileged background is not a problem actually. The question comes, the parents like me, I am so much, busy in my day-to-day life and building the company and thinking about the fund and how to help companies, I am not spending enough time with my giving the cultural orientation to my
Or
children.
transmitting values.
Values we transmit. That values we transmit because we came from middle class, so the value system remains the same. I think on a daily basis, if you tell them a story about entrepreneurship, it will make a difference to them. If they have an early touch point with entrepreneurship, it will help them. A lot of time they are lost in their choices of which channel they are buying. Should they buy a PlayStation or a Nintendo? I think that cultural orientation will be very different. Cultural orientation will make a difference, at least in my view.
Good. Going back to your early days at Eka, how did you find your first 5 or 10 employees?
So, very interesting story. In 2004, people would not join a product company. They will say, I want to join only a services company because my salary won't go up if I don't work in 5 technologies. That was your resume has to say C++, Java, C Sharp, whatever is a new technology.
Right.
And at product company, will say you will work
You're a
only on
billable
Java.
resource, so you're thinking how can you become more valuable by learning and knowing more languages, and therefore it directly correlates to how much more you can bill to someone else.
Correct. And in product, you will only work on one technology for 10 years, 15 years because and you just continue to build on that, right? So people would not join when I came to Bangalore. Luckily, therefore what I did, I went to a company called eCapital Solution called Trigen Technologies, listed in Bombay Stock Exchange. So I said, okay, why don't you start building the product for me first version? And then I bought the entire team from them. So that's how I built the team in Bangalore.
That's a very pragmatic decision, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think founders are always confronted with build versus buy decisions. This is again like something very interesting. You decided to...
Because, see, in India, at least what I have seen is, most of tech people are starting. So technology is never a problem. I was a business founder starting a technology business, right? So I didn't know anything about technology and I didn't know Bangalore also. So I just came here, stayed in Pi Village Lodge in Jayanagar, and that's what I did. I said, okay, fine. Why to find people? Because 5 people said no. I said, find somebody who already built and do something with it.
Over the years, of course, your organization grew. You've hired a lot of people. I'm sure lots of them are very talented. What was your mental model to finding talented people?
So I think various department has various. So first of all, that I made the entire team transfer from there was a gentleman named Mr. Vinayak. He came in and he said, I will take the risk, and he came on board to the company, leaving the services company. So that really formed our tech base for the tech team. Then for the product management, now I can talk product management. I had no clue it's called product management. Actually, I went back to my friends from my college from IFT because they are mostly on the business side. So 2 of them were in Bangalore. I made them offer to join me actually. That's how the first business team got formed. They will do the product thinking, bit of marketing, and then we have the tech team to do that. Once we start, and I was a salesperson because I had the relationships and I was in the trading background. So I will go around the world and make a pitch to the CIOs or to the head of the businesses saying, this is how I can solve your problem, this is how software looks. So I will do demo, do the entire sales myself. That was the first 7 years of journey. Then the key question comes, how are you going to scale the sales? I cannot be everywhere, right? So now the challenge is, in 2008 and 9, a lot of services firm had opened their consulting arms. Because Accenture had come to India, IBM had come to India, they all started consulting arms. And there were a lot of mishaps in the early days of recruiting a foreign talent into the company because the cultural differences, right? You are not attuned to the spending in the local cultures. As Indians, we don't understand the local culture as much because we haven't traveled that much. So there's a big challenge to hire a sales or head of sales. Then I thought, now how to handle that problem? So again, the first principles, I thought, let me make a call to head of sales of all my competition. So my competition was TriplePoint, Openlink, SAP, large companies at that time, about $100 million plus companies. So I started calling them, cold calling. And few of them didn't pick up my phone. One person luckily picked up my phone saying, please don't call me, again and again, it's not nice. I'm never going to work for Indian company. I said, fine, since I have you on phone, can I meet you? I said, no. He said, no. Why? What will you do by meeting me? Okay, so I said, let's have coffee. What I will do is, tell me your travel schedule. He said, I am flying to London tomorrow, so I am going to be very busy. I said, okay, let me do one thing. I will travel to London next day, and I will meet you at Heathrow. Just have a coffee. You anyway will take a shower. Most of the people from New York travel to London that red-eye flight, take shower in the arrival lounge. I knew that. I said, I will meet you in the arrival lounge. Half an hour coffee, and then you're free to go. He said, fine. Luckily, he said, fine. And then he traveled to London. I went there. Then half an hour become 2 hours. I sold him the vision as to what we were building to build, a global company. And he used to work for the ICE, which is the Intercontinental Exchange. And he said, yes, fine, I will come and join you. So that's how we started hiring. The first hire for the sales happened.
What does that actually say about the process of finding talent? This thing of what you just did. It sounds, now if you were logically trying to assess this, if you were trying to say the cost of you flying to London, the cost of that, you would say, there is no part of you that will say it's going to amount to anything, because the person's already said they don't want to meet you, they don't want to join. And you think that they're just going to be off a flight, they're just humoring you because, right? But you still did it. What do you kind of look back at it and why do you do it?
I think I personally believe that there's a value in relationships, first of all. And the relationships are based on honesty and trust over a period of time. So when I make a special effort to come and meet you at the place that you want, even when I know that you're going to humor me, that says a lot about my commitment. Doesn't say a lot about your commitment, but definitely you will know, okay, Manav is committed to this. And then if you're honest, people will start taking you seriously. And that point in time, you get enough opportunity to explain what you're doing. And then there is a value creation happens, right? So I think if there is enough commitment, your value system is around honesty, and then you show the real business value, there will be a lot of conversion in my view. And more often than not, if you see as human behavior, we're always skeptical of calling people, because our mind assumes he's going to say no anyways. Anyways, people are saying they're not going to join. Why should I even make an attempt to call? So people are not usually listening to no.
But you got over that because you just had to make a lot of calls when you were young.
And I was a trader. Trading work is that, you're not going to get every deal. So it humbles you a lot. You can never be better than the market, no matter who you are. The best traders also get the market right 60% of the time, more than 50%. That's how you make the money. But they're wrong 40% of the time. Since I've gone through this process of cleansing process, right? You start the day saying you're going to be wrong. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to have somebody say no. But it's more important of 100 times you're right 51 times. That one time you're right can make you money.
First Principles is made possible with the efforts of a wonderful team. Rajiv CN, our resident sound engineer who mixes and masters our sound and audio, and Hari Krishna who produces and researches the episodes. Also, we at First Principles love feedback. So write to us. Tell us what we can improve. How else would we know? Guests we should invite, questions you think we should be asking, even things you find annoying. We'll be sure to read it, and almost always we do reply. You can write to us at fp@theken.com. And while I still have you here, if you love listening to First Principles, please rate us on your favorite podcast streaming platform. Please, please, please. On that plaintive note, I'm Rohin Dharmakumar, your host, and I'll see you next Thursday. Stay cool, stay safe.